Hey there, I'm Joey from EDH Rec, and I have a question that I need some help answering. So as many of you know, I have a list that I call the Commander deck, where every card has to say the word Commander on it. I've done a whole video on this deck, although it's certainly changed a lot since that video. Basically, it's a ton of lieutenants, familiars, and since the deck has two commanders, backgrounds that amp up both commanders are really cool. And to clarify, yes, this restriction applies to my lands too. All my non-basic lands also have to mention commanders. And further, I'm not playing stuff like Siege Gang Commander or cards like that. I mean that every card has to mention specifically EDH Commanderness. It's one of my favorites, one of my most played decks. I love it to bits. There's a link to it in the description of this video, and actually, if you want to see this deck in action, it was recently on an episode of Commander at Home. Link in the description for that too. And if you do decide to go check out either of those, make sure that while you're there, you like and subscribe too. Helps out a lot. Now, all that said, over the past week or so, there's actually been a little bit of a plot twist for this deck because of the new Universes Beyond Assassin's Creed Freerunning cards. Freerunning spells have an alternative casting cost if you've hit somebody with an assassin or a commander that turn, kind of like the old Prowl ability, if you remember that one. I posted online that, hey, it looks like I got some new toys for my Commander deck, but I got a polite amount of pushback about it from people who wondered whether these Freerunning cards actually fit the Commander theme. Honestly, I was initially kind of surprised to see that reaction, but also, I get it. See, here's the thing. The Freerunning cards do refer to your commander, but only in their reminder text. So here the comparison is to the extort mechanic, which has a black-white symbol in it, but only in the reminder text, so technically extort cards such as Cryptcast are legal in a mono-black commander deck, because color identity doesn't care about reminder text, and in fact, there are versions of extort cards that don't have that reminder text and therefore don't show that symbol at all. This was actually almost an issue with Kibo, by the way. Kibo has a red symbol in its text box, but the token is the actual thing with that red symbol. So rules discussions had to be very careful about whether Kibo was the thing conferring that ability and that color identity, or if that red symbol was a property of the token, and would that muck with whether Kibo had a green color identity or a Gruul color identity. It feels very intuitive having Kibo as Gruul, but the rules do have to be very precise in their wording about that kind of thing, you know? I just think it's kind of interesting. Anyway, back to the Freerunning thing. Over this past weekend, I was at a Magic event in Tacoma, and I got the chance to play some games with friends, with a bunch of viewers, just an awesome time with awesome people. And eventually, I got around to asking some folks about their thoughts on the Freerunning question, and I got some mixed answers. From listeners, from Commander Advisory Group members, from Rules Committee members, and from Wizards of the Coast staff alike. I got some varying answers about whether or not they thought the Freerunning cards worked within that deck building constraint of the Commander deck. I got a lot of responses in favor of the idea, but I also met plenty of folks who gave the idea pause, particularly citing the extort example as their main reasoning. I feel that it's worth me saying real quick that during some of those conversations, I mentioned that the cards I've chosen as the commanders, Timna and Tana, also only have the word commander in their reminder text, because they have the partner ability, which is, to my understanding, the only other ability that mentions commander in reminder text. So if the Freerunning cards feel like they aren't allowed or that they break the theme, how do we then feel about the commanders themselves saying commander in their reminder text? And you know what? During those conversations, when I asked that question, I got some dang good responses. For instance, you wouldn't play any other partners in the 99 of that deck because they say commander in their reminder text, right? And no, that's true, I wouldn't. Folks also brought up that if, for instance, you did a Scryfall search for the word commander in the text of a card, Scryfall wouldn't bring up any of the Freerunning spells. And yeah, that's another really fair point. But on the flip side, I also got some other really great responses from those who ultimately fell in favor of the idea. And two particular ones that I would like to specifically highlight here came from Daquan Watson of the Commander Advisory Group and Gavin Duggan of the Rules Committee. Daquan made me laugh a lot when he said, sure, use them, but you gotta use the versions that have the reminder text. You can't ever use the other versions. It comes down to the actual text printed on the physical card. Sort of like what we've seen in some unsets with cards that care about rarity, or about watermarks, or that care about reminder text. So different versions of cards that have different rarity symbols, or different watermarks, or different versions that do or do not have reminder text are affected by those uncards in different ways. And initially I was a little bit thrown because that almost feels like it's hewing really close to silver bordered territory for a deck that I want to be black border. But then again, this is actually, in fact, something we do a lot in theme decks already, right? We play the one version of the card that fits the theme. For instance, my buddy Daniel plays Seedborn Muse in his Kamigawa only deck because he's using the version of that card that has Kamigawan art. The other response I want to highlight, though, is one that came from Gavin, who's on the Rules Committee for Commander. And what he said was that technically, No. That because of the ways that things like extort work, Freerunning mentioning commander in the reminder text rather than in the text doesn't technically meet the restriction. But it does spiritually meet the restriction. When you're in the game against that deck, if you've been told that every card in the deck has to refer to a commander, and then I cast a free-running card because my commander has hit someone, will that feel like it broke the immersion of the theme? No, he said. It will feel right in line with that entire idea. Whereas playing another card with partner in the 99 wouldn't feel right, because that is more like the Siege Gang commander example. It says commander on it, but it isn't referring to your commander, whereas the free-running cards have reminder text that specifically cares about your commander doing something, much in the way that backgrounds or lieutenants care about your commander doing something. So letter of the law, no, but spirit of the law, yes. Honestly, that's kind of how I'd been leaning the whole time, but it just felt really nice to hear someone else put it into words like that, you know? And also, big thanks to everybody who took time to chat with me about it. The reason I wanted to turn that odd kind of experience into a little video here is because that whole letter of the law versus spirit of the law thing is dang tricky. And I kind of want to use an inverse example to show a kind of weird habit that Magic players have about these types of situations. A buddy in my local playgroup has a deck that is oops all 1-drops. All of the cards in the deck are 1 mana. And when he plays that deck, he's remarked that he's sometimes gotten just a little bit of side-eye from the fact that the deck contains some X spells. They are technically 1 mana cards, but when he casts them during a game, he's not just spending 1 mana on those spells, now is he? So, like I said, it's the inverse. By the letter of the law, he's totally right. Like, if Obosh could be his companion for that deck, Obosh would look at all of the mana costs in the list and be like, yep, those all cost 1 mana. But sometimes folks feel like the X spells aren't necessarily in the spirit of the law because they don't actually cost 1 mana to cast, like all of the other spells do. My point here isn't that one of us is right or wrong. I don't think either of us is right or wrong. We didn't have to do a silly deck building restriction for these decks. We just liked those ideas. It was fun. And it was also really fun to find ways to flex within those restrictions too. And I'll say again that no one who's voiced any dissent about this topic has ever been like a butthead about it, but it is just kind of interesting that over the course of us playing games with a bunch of people, both my buddy and I have encountered the exact same reaction for the exact opposite reasons. I've met some hesitation about whether free-running cards fit the exact letter of the law, and he's met some hesitation from folks about whether X spells fit the spirit of the law. As Magic players, we really want those two things to be in alignment. As human people, we want those two things to be in alignment. But that's not always the case. In fact, in real life, it's rarely the case. As players, I think we crave reliable structure, so judging something by whether it feels right is inherently subjective and out of line with a lot of the other ways in which we engage with this game, which is why we'd be inclined to stick to clean rules. But also as players, we crave novelty and creativity and surprise, which are sometimes at odds with strict or rigid rules. It's a strange thing that there's not a correct answer, you know? And in fact, I've gotten several messages from viewers eagerly asking which free-running cards I'll be playing in my Commander deck, which indicates to me that if I didn't play any of those cards in the deck, people would be surprised by it. So just as much as there are folks who've said it might be considered a theme break to play those cards in that deck, there are also folks who actively hope I do play those cards in that deck. It's a well-known adage that you can't please everyone, and this is a very low-stakes example of it, but it's an important lesson nonetheless. And since there's no way to necessarily make everyone happy with whichever choice I make, I could just say that I'll go ahead and make the choice that feels right to me. I mean, it's my deck after all. But I ultimately do care a lot about what my opponents experience when I play this deck. If I cast something that to them feels like it punctures the promise I made up at the top of the game, their reactions matter a lot to me. So of course I'm going to care what other people think about it. You know, I didn't just craft this deck as an experience for myself, I want it to be something that I can share with other people. And frankly, this is all a lot of overthinking about this whole free-running mechanic thing, because if I'm honest, I'd probably only use like one of those cards in that deck anyway. And further, it's not even an ability I like very much. I think it's kind of weird that they threw in the, oh, and also commanders onto the end of that ability. Like, I think it's actually kind of a flavor fail that the effect isn't unique to assassins. And I know that the only reason that Wizards tacked on the extra little bit of text there isn't because they were aiming to create a sincere expression of the flavor of assassin free-running, but because they knew that having that extra writer would help sell more packs. But for such a tiny thing, it has interesting ripple effects that say a lot about the ways that we as players engage with with Magic, how seriously we take our fun, how much we want to honor the restrictions that we've set for ourselves, and the stories that we want to create with these expressive multiplayer games. And since Wizards of the Coast is so intent upon catering to Commander players in every single set, well, this small thing is actually something that I should figure out kind of quick, huh? Like, I say it's a lot of overthinking, but then again, what happens the next time that Wizards of the Coast makes a mechanic that says Commander in the reminder text? It's a tiny thing now, but actually I gotta figure it out now instead of putting it off until later, because this tiny thing is actually kind of setting a precedent, which is why little details can actually be a big deal. So I hope this weird reminder text question has given you something interesting to ponder. We've heard a lot over the years about the, quote, spirit of the Commander format. It's a subject that gets a whole lot of scrutiny. And the next time that I find myself in a conversation about the spirit of the format, I think this small example will help me remember the different ways that we each approach those kinds of concepts. The valid reasons to abide by the spirit of the law and the valid reasons to abide by the letter of the law, and how difficult it is to make both of those things align, and how no matter what you choose, someone will probably disagree. So, what do you think? If you had a Commander deck, would you play any of these cards in that list? I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on this one. Definitely let me know in the comments below. While you're at it, do all of the happy YouTube algorithm things, like and subscribe, all of that nonsense. If you want to see my version of the deck, it is linked in the description box below, along with a link to all of our deck lists as well. So yeah, I gotta hear from you, and until next time, remember, EDH wreck your deck before you wreck your deck.